This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Andy Clark, who is the best-selling author and business strategist behind the Whole PIE system, which is a framework that helps small business owners build companies that are more profitable, impactful, and enjoyable. With a background in business law and 2 decades of advising and running businesses, Andy saw firsthand that most entrepreneurs aren't failing from lack of effort. They're overwhelmed by complexity and constant firefighting. Determined to offer a better path, he created a simple, practical system that helps owners get out of the weeds and lead with clarity and confidence. Andy has since worked with business owners across North America to streamline operations, strengthen teams, and create businesses that grow sustainably without burning them out. His philosophy is direct. Structure creates freedom, and small changes can unlock massive results. Known for making businesses feel achievable again, Andy gives overwhelmed founders the tools and the belief to reclaim their time, increase profit, and rediscover the joy in their work. When he's not coaching entrepreneurs, he's traveling between Canada and Costa Rica with his wife and 4 children. So Andy, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks so much for that intro.
So give us a little context. I believe you're Canadian, but you live in Costa Rica. So just tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and how you got into this line of work and why you're in Costa Rica now.
Yeah, thanks. Long story. How do you make it a short story? So I'm a Canadian. I grew up on the east coast of Canada in a little province called New Brunswick, which is just north of the state of Maine, sandwiched between the provinces of Quebec and Nova Scotia. And spent the majority of my life there. And now live in Costa Rica, as you mentioned. How did we get from little province in Canada to Costa Rica? Well, it goes back to COVID, when a lot of people sort of took that time to do some introspection and kind of reevaluate a few things and kind of take stock of life and where they are and where they want to go. And I did a lot of that. And it did 2 things, Steve. One was it allowed me to take stock of what is it that I know? After 25 years of being a business lawyer, of being an entrepreneur, of managing and running businesses, it allowed me that pause allowed me to really think about what is my next step? Where do I go from here? And what is it that I know? And what I realized at that point was what I know and what I'm really good at is structured execution. And what does that mean? It means I'm really good at taking a big idea and breaking it down into its core parts and figuring out the best pathway to get there. And as a next step or a next realization that happened was I realized that what I have as my natural skill set is missing in a lot of small businesses. Small business owners generally really good at big ideas, at vision, at relationships, at being action oriented, but not as good at the execution and the focus and the discipline and the accountability. So through that sort of introspective time in COVID, decided, hey, I have this thing that I think can be really helpful to small business owners. So ever since then, been working together with small business owners in that capacity. And part 2 of that story, before I throw it back over to you, is just realizing that the world's a small place. Do we really need to be in Canada for the rest. We really need to be freezing our butts off for the rest of our lives. And so we took the opportunity when schools were online anyway, and a lot of things were shut down. We just said, "Hey, let's go travel, and let's see some parts of the world." So we went. One of the places we went was Costa Rica. Fell in love with it, and decided to make it permanent.
Yeah, that's great. Now you've also entered the world of authorship here, so I'm holding up for those on video
Uh-huh.
your book, which is Getting the Whole Pie, and it is a book that's structured, like you say, it presents a structure and how to do these things, and so we'll talk about that as we go forward today. Um, but it's like you said, most entrepreneurs aren't really failing, because of the lack of effort. It's just that. They're overwhelmed. And as an executive coach, I know that a lot of people I work with, it's just the overwhelm is really there. So how do I deal with that overwhelm? And not just like you say, firefighting, not just putting out fires that come up, but being more intentional and being more forward with what's important and what isn't, and how to get there. So, did you like writing the book? Was it a tough ordeal?
No.
Was it pretty easy? Yeah, because a lot of people say, well, why don't you write a book? And I'm kind of like, oh man, I don't know. That sounds like a grind. So
Yeah.
it can't be
Seems
easy.
like a great idea at the time, right? It seems like it's, going to be pretty straightforward. But no, I'm really happy I did it because, what was happening was that uh, you know, um, people needed me to help them. Uh, in other words, the system that I developed, it was all kind of in my head, and I had training materials that I would work with my clients with, um, but it needed me, and so not scalable. One of the things that I do with small business owners is help them implement structures that help them scale, to help get the business owner out of the weeds and out of all the decision making, so that the business isn't reliant on them. But I wasn't sort of taking my own advice, right? And so one of the ways that I decided that I could kind of take myself out of the equation and get this information into more business owners' hands was to write the book. And so now any business owner can pick it up and flip through it and do the exercises that are in the book. If it resonates, great. They can go deeper. If it doesn't resonate, that's okay too. But at least it gives more people the opportunity to interact with the system than having to go through me. But it's not for the faint of heart trying to publish a book. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. How long did it take you?
So it took me two answers to that. I get that question a lot. One answer is about 6 years. But that was like the development and testing of the framework and all the material and getting case studies and proving that it works. But the actual from the moment I said I now want to turn this into a published book that more people can have access to, that was about a 1 year project.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it intrigued me because, my job as an executive coach, I've kind of focused on the niche of leadership and leadership development and so on. And I'm sure we can agree that that's really important. But the framework, like you're talking about, is the structure. Not everybody knows that and understands that to the degree that it helps. And one of the statements you make in there is that structure creates freedom. So systems are important, and the better your systems are, I think the more ability you have then to do your leadership things if you have a good structure behind it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Steve. And it's kind of counterintuitive. I get a little bit of pushback sometimes on from a business owner who like I said, they're the creatives. They have the big ideas, and initially a business owner can feel like structure will be constraining. Um, but the reality of it is that having that structure in place, and there's a lot of different elements of the structure, which we can talk about if we have time. But once the structure is in place, it allows the business owner then it's freeing right? It is freeing for business owners to then to know that, okay, that structure stuff that they probably don't like naturally is in place. So one half of their brain isn't kind of always wondering about, is that happening? Is this happening? Are we doing this the right way? That gets taken care of, and it actually frees the business owner up to do what they are best at, right? Which is to come up with big ideas, to lead the team, to be creative, to be that kind of leader, that magnetic personality, that relationship builder.
Yeah. And then what I see in my work too is, like you said, a lot of people feel like I can see why there's resistance because a lot of people feel like, well, we've got to get moving. I mean, I can plan until the cows come home, but I got to move. I got to get some revenue. I got to do this, which is understandable. But a lot of times in my business, I see them grow it to a certain point, and then they get to a point where them as one person can't get beyond that growth, but then there's no systems to support it. They don't have the executive
Mm,
team, they don't have the systems. And so then you
mm,
kind of have to go back and redo it after you're already there. And then that is a real time suck for getting in the way of the business too. So I think it
mm,
makes a lot of sense. And in the book, you've laid it out um, very well in the sense that you can follow this formula, you can follow the framework, and you can put it in place where for people that are more right brain thinkers, the more visionary people, the thought of creating this structure and laying it out is overwhelming in itself. So a framework like this makes a lot of sense.
yeah, thank you. And it's really designed to for the small business that is at the stage where they've had some success, and like you say, that success has largely been owner or founder driven.
Yeah.
They built a small team, let's say 5 to 20 people generally, and uh, the more that they bring on, the more that they have that growth in terms of customers and in terms of employees, the more complexity seeps into the business, and it's one of these necessary evils that and all businesses will go through it in order to bust through to that next stage. And so what I've tried to do is really key in on that stage of the business
Yeah.
evolution before the business is at the stage where they have a full-blown leadership team. They've got a CFO, a COO, or director of HR, director of marketing. Like that's a little bit further on. And what I'm trying to do with this system is to enable the founder-led business to bridge that gap until they are at the size where they do have that full team.
Yeah, you're very direct in the book that says, this isn't probably for startups. I think
No.
you say like, 3 years out is kind of a good time to consider something like this. And then you also talk about that your niche for this framework and what you're doing is between the $500,000 and the $5 million revenue generated business. So it is for small business, and it just gives them that framework.
Exactly right. And that they have different needs. A business in that stage has different needs than a 10 million plus business. And uh, I do work with businesses that are 10 million plus, um, but they were within they were below 5 million, and then
Yeah.
they can really benefit from this framework and these strategies to grow with confidence. And so um, yeah, I've seen it work, and it's really satisfying to me um, when I can see that this business and the business owner has busted through a ceiling that they were butting up against and had moved on to that next phase.
And you also state too that I think is true when you're looking at this overwhelm. Sometimes you say that small changes really unlock massive results. So it can be overwhelming when you look at the whole, but if you can just look at little things and just start doing smaller things, then those multiply and get you further down the road.
So true. That's again, when we talk about, as a small business owner, you're already got more work, more things to do. Your to-do list is longer than it will ever. Um, you don't have enough time to get all those things knocked off on your to-do list. It just keeps growing rather than shrinking, right? And in the Maritimes where I come from in Canada, we call it trying to stuff 20 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound bag. We keep trying and trying and trying, but it doesn't work. It's just too much. There's too much to do. So starting from that premise, it's difficult for, me to come in and be like, hey, if you do all this stuff, your business is going to get a lot better. And the immediate reaction is, I don't have the time or the bandwidth to think about doing anything different.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's why it has to start small with small little incremental changes, step by step. And in fact, the first thing we do when we work together is we identify ways to clear out some things in the schedule of the business owner.
yeah.
Because no matter how busy somebody is, there's always things that we can cut out. There are things, particularly that small business owners do, that they do not need to be doing.
Right.
They can be delegating, or they can be a little bit more effective with their time. So that's actually where we start, is what I call the stop doing exercise, is really taking stock of what it is, like how are you spending your days and your weeks, and really looking at it both inside and outside of your business to understand where are you spending your time. And there's always 3 to 5 hours at least that we can find in a business owner's week that we can carve out and free up that time to start looking at, okay, how are we going to implement some of these changes into their business that will help them bust through that stage that they're at.
Well, I think you could make the argument that the definition of busy is probably doing things you shouldn't be doing. So when people say, "Oh, I'm so busy," that to me that's kind of an indication that you're probably doing some things that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I had a past guest on this show, and she said, which I think is so true when I think about it, is that good CEOs might be busy, but great CEOs, the little hidden secret is they're not that busy.
yeah,
And they have a
yeah,
lot more time to do the things that make them great,
yeah.
because they have delegated and they've put up systems and they've done things, and they aren't the ones that are going to say, "I'm so busy." I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it.
Oh, yeah. And this takes me back to my days practicing law. So I was a business lawyer for 10 years. And I don't know if anyone's listening ever practiced law, in a bigger-ish firm setting where I practiced. The badge of honor for a business lawyer was busyness.
Yeah.
And they, when you see each other in the elevator, the, the more senior lawyers would always ask, "Are you busy? Are you busy? Are you busy?" And even if you weren't busy, you'd never say no. You'd always say yes. Oh, not being busy was a sign of weakness. And I think that rings true a little bit also in the business owner realm as well. Like nobody wants to not be busy. But
Right.
I think more true though is you just is everyone's busy, but are you, the real question, like you said, are you busy doing the right things? What are you doing that is making you busy? As the business owner, you should be doing only the things that only the business owner should be doing.
Right.
Leadership and relationship building, being the face of the business. Those are the things. So got to get out of the weeds, and that's how we. One of the benefits of implementing this framework is to help you get out of the weeds.
A real eye opener for me, I'll just tell a personal story here. As the CEO of a company, I, kind of at a time, my wife and I had never been to Italy, and we really wanted to go to Italy and wanted to do it right. So the idea came up like we'd go for a month. Well, I went to my board to ask if I could be gone for a month, and I totally expected them to say no, and they said, "Yeah, I think we can work that out." So they approved it. They said, "Sure, you can go." So in prep for that, I prepared my executive staff. I prepared my administrative assistant. We went through some, how do you deal with emails and how do you deal with this and whatever. And then I had some systems that, I'd cleared with my wife and we agreed on that every morning I would probably get in front of my computer for 30 minutes and deal with anything I had to do, but then delegate things and whatever. So when I got back after a month, I sat in my office, and after 2 or 3 days, I came home and I told my wife, I hope I can't find enough to do. I hope they don't know this or they're going to let me go
Yeah.
because, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But I had done such a good job of preparing for that. It was an eye opener to me.
Yeah.
You really can do that and then
Great.
focus on just what you said. And what my gift is and what my skill was the relationship building and meeting with
Yes.
people, talking with people. And it was a real eye opener for me. So I wholeheartedly
Mm.
believe that can be done if you do it intentionally.
Yes. And the other thing that it allows you to do, I love that story. Thank you for that. I might steal that and use that if you don't mind, Steve, as a good
Absolutely.
example. Uh,
Absolutely.
but it also allows you, it allows it frees you up as the leader and strategic thinker of your business. What's around the next corner, right? What are those important but not urgent things that I can be working on right now? That famous quadrant of the urgent and important and the non-urgent and not important. I think it was Stephen Covey's. I might be misattributing that, but the growth of a business always happens in that top right hand corner. That important but non-urgent things
Yeah.
in a business, like strategic planning, like doing a SWOT analysis, like relationship building and building relationships that are only going to turn into customers or whatever you want them to turn into 12, 18, 24 months from now. But that's where business owner should be, is in that top right hand quadrant rather than in the urgent and important, or even worse, the urgent and not important things like fighting fires in a business. So we really try to be strategic about that. And one of the byproducts of the structure, it gets back to the freedom discussion we were having, right? Is that one of the byproducts of this structure is that it creates the freedom for the business owner to live in that important but non-urgent quadrant of their business.
And I think in the subtitle of your book, you talk about profitable, impactful, and enjoyable. And the last one caught my attention as well. The joyful in enjoying
Mm.
it. It's to me, what are you doing it for if you're not enjoying it? I talked to a CEO just the other day, and I made a comment about, well, at least, it's fun, going forward this point or whatever. And she said, well, it's not fun. And it gave me a pause, like, gosh, if it's not fun, this isn't a good
Yeah.
formula, because when you're buried in that business, when you're buried in the overwhelm and all that, I would agree it's not fun. But you somehow got to find enjoyment of what you're doing. Otherwise, what's the point?
Well, you're preaching to the choir on that one, Steve. Um, and I think every business owner wants to enjoy the process. Like, I don't think anyone is resistant to the idea that running a business must be all work and no play, right? It must be hard work and no fun. Like, I think everyone understands that that's the goal, but reality sets in, and this idea of creating freedom for yourself, both time freedom, financial freedom, relationship freedom. I think that's what a lot of business owners want to get out of their business. They're 3, 5, 8 years in, and they don't have those things. Um, and and that's sad to me, right? And it's sad to me because, like, part of my why as that leads me to do what I do is that I think that small business owners literally are like they're the fabric of our communities. They're on Main Street, and they create jobs, and they sponsor the soccer teams and the hockey teams, and they go to all the fundraisers, and they support all the nonprofits. And uh, but the universe is in many ways is stacked against their success.
Yeah.
in terms of, red tape and taxes and, and going back to COVID, who got to stay open during COVID? Was it the small businesses? No, absolutely not. Who suffered the most, from a business perspective during COVID? Small business. So um, when I think about a small business owner who works really hard, they take risks, they're the fabric of our community, and they're not enjoying that process, that makes me sad. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that way. And so that's why, very intentionally in the framework that I put together, we put enjoyment right uh, right at the forefront of strategic planning alongside profit, which is the making money, which
Right.
is important, the
Yes.
impact, which is making people's lives better in some way, which is generally why they buy your products or services in the first place. So we put that enjoyment right up there, side by side, no more, no less, with the profit and the impact. And I think that's what's the big difference between sort of the framework that I work with and that I've developed, the whole pie system, and some of the other ones that are out there, which are either all about the business, all about just about the money. And don't get me wrong, the money is super important. Um, or it's like all about the, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Business owner, you can be happy, take a more vacation or do yoga or whatever. All that's good too. But I feel like when you marry up like the kind of the discipline of KPIs, et cetera, with the goal or the outcome of enjoying your business, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's always a little risky to make generalizations, but I'm intrigued to ask you this question since you are an attorney. It seems like in law, with the billable hours and the pressure to do that and doing that, a lot of people that I run into that aren't that happy are lawyers. They're like they wish they were doing something different. They wish, and since you've lived both worlds, I wonder, do you see that as well? Do you see that that profession in particular has a reputation, or at least, from an outside perspective, that it's so busy, so billable hour oriented that it's hard to find enjoyment in that a lot of times.
Yes. Short answer is yes. And the story behind that is that actually getting the whole pie is my second book. My first book, and actually my first foray into entrepreneurship, um, was to try to sell wellness or the concept of well-being to lawyers. I ran a business called Wellness Lawyer for a while, and my first book was called Lawyer Wellness is Not an Oxymoron. So yes, I saw that, I lived it, I experienced it, and back then I was naive enough, I think, to think that I could actually change the profession in a way. Um, I think there's more receptivity. That's not a word. More, I don't know. There's more willingness to accept that now than it was 15 years ago when I was sort of on the bleeding edge of trying to change the profession for the better. Um, but that it's a tough business, and as long as you're trading time for money, even if your billable rate is whatever it is, $1,000 now. I don't even know what billable rates are anymore, but even if
Yeah.
it is that, you're still trading time for money, and as long as you're trading time for money, it's a bad business model, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It needs to be value for money, not time for money.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you talk in the book too about working with these small businesses and some of the things that I pulled out of this. You talked about, it's hard for these small businesses to manage growth. It's also, often they don't hold people accountable, as accountable as they should, and as we talked before, putting too much emphasis on putting out the fires. Um, all those things are we see in small businesses that are hard to get over. So tell us how your framework or whatever helps them get
Mhm.
through those pieces that are roadblocks.
Yeah, so specifically, around accountability. Um, So there's two. If we get into the sort of nuts and bolts a little bit, so there's two. So there's three outcomes that we're trying for here, right? PIE, profit, impact, enjoyment. So we've already talked about that. So how do you generate more of those three things? And so there's two pieces of the framework. There's the foundation, uh, and then there's the flywheel. The foundation is what I call the four P's: purpose, planning, people, and process. And so we look at each of those four areas and we kind of shore up any cracks that you might have in the foundation and those four areas. But really, where the magic starts to happen is in the what I call the flywheel part of the framework. And the flywheel, whereas you might revisit planning and purpose and people and process, maybe quarterly. Um, the flywheel is what you do weekly and what you do day to day, and that's where accountability happens. And one of the key pieces of the flywheel is you and your leadership team, and it can be a small team. That's fine. Um, you have a regular weekly leadership team meeting, and it's usually 90 minutes, could be less, and it has the same six agenda items on it every single week. You're covering the same six broad headings. Those include, let's look at our KPIs. Let's look at our key building blocks, which are our strategic goals for the quarter. We look at them every week, and there are other items on that agenda. And I won't get in it too deep right now, but all of that has the effect of accountability. It builds accountability into the DNA of your small business.
Mhm.
Um, and it's almost imperceptible. But when you do that, when you commit to that weekly cadence and you're looking at only the most important aspects of your business every week for 90 minutes, nobody wants to show up at that meeting and say, hey, I didn't get that action item done.
Mhm.
Hey, this KPI that I'm responsible for, it's falling below target. This key initiative that we all agreed on this quarter that I'm leading, shoot, I'm not going to get that done. Nobody wants that to happen.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes things, life happens, sometimes things go off course. That's fine. But that, in terms of accountability, that's how you build it into your culture. So it's not so much of I need to show up every day and think, am I keeping people accountable? No, it's a byproduct of the structure that you implement and that you all commit to. And it's a little clunky at first, but after literally 3 to 4 weeks of doing this, you're off for the races and the accountability culture in your small business goes through the roof.
And one of the things you mentioned in the book too, which I think is really important, is the accountability to each other to make sure that the decisions you're making are supportive of the core values of the company. A lot
Oh,
of times,
yeah.
well, this makes sense. Let's do this. But if it goes against what the core value of the business is, it's never going to work it's not sustainable.
Mm. Yeah. So core values live. I talked earlier about the foundation component, and one of the pieces of that is purpose. So when
Yeah.
I think about the purpose of a business, you're thinking about vision, you're thinking about mission, you're thinking about core values. That's, in my opinion, that's where it lives. And then once you're really clear on those things, um, as a business, it really helps not only accountability, but also your decision making. It facilitates decision making. It makes decision making easier because when you think about how many decisions you have to make in the run of a week running a small business, both big and small, like that's a lot. And if you can, and it takes a lot of energy to make those decisions. Should we not? Why? So if you can run all those decisions through the filter of your vision, of your mission, of your core values, call it values-based decision making, you can actually say no to a lot of things right off the bat
Yeah.
that you would otherwise spend a lot of time, hemming
Not,
and hawing about because they don't align with your vision, your mission, your core values.
yeah, I
Um,
can,
and
yeah,
so,
CEO, I can
Yeah,
remember saying things like, okay, we're trying to make this big decision and there's a lot of discussion going on. And just to say, okay, if we decide this way or this way, you know, what talks to our core values the most? I think it's a good way to remember which
yeah.
core values are and review them, but also, like you said, you can maybe save a lot of time by saying, oh, we can't even consider this because it goes against our core value.
Exactly, exactly. And one of my favorite business quotes is a Peter Drucker quote, which is paraphrasing. I might have it right, but it's like the only thing there's nothing as useless as doing something efficiently, which should not be done at all. So as doing something efficiently,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't be done at all, right? And I see that a lot. Um, and by using values-based decision making, you can eliminate a lot of those doing things really, really well, but they don't align with your core values. They're not taking you closer to your vision. They're not congruent with your mission. So what are you doing it for in the first place? Um, and in the book, actually, there's an example of that with an accounting firm that I worked with. Um, and they were just so proud of how they did this particular process that like at the end of every year they would put together this beautiful binder of all the records of their clients so they could send it over to the CPAs to do the tax returns and everything, and it was this elaborate process that allowed them to do this. And then just with one simple question, it was just like, why are you doing this? Like, what would be missing if you didn't do this? Like, the world now, it all lives in the cloud anyway. Why are you doing this beautiful binder to give to the CPAs? They can just access the files in the cloud-based accounting software. And so just with that shift, this beautiful, very well executed process was no longer needed. And the time that it saved this monthly accounting firm was massive. So it's these kinds of, when we go back to like little things can make a big difference. Like that one little change in the business created so much more time that could be then reallocated to income producing activities for this business.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Now, do you do workshops based on your framework and so on, outside of your just coaching individual clients? Do you do workshops?
Yeah, so typically I do workshops if like a Chamber of Commerce asks me to present to them, or other professional associations or things like that. I will do workshops. I don't. It's not what gets me up in the morning. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, but how I like to work with clients, small business owners, is in small groups.
Okay.
So it's kind of workshoppy the way we collaborate and work together, so that the group is not only kind of learning the whole pie system, from me, and me helping them implement it into their business, but they're also getting to collaborate with other business owners that are doing it at the same time. So they can, share challenges and successes and wins and that kind of thing together. So it's a bit of a workshoppy type approach to the implementation of the system.
That's kind of like a mastermind concept, right? Where and so do you as the consultant or coach or however you like to refer to it, so do you put those groups together? Say I've got a client here, I've got a client there. Let's put these five or six people together and have them work together, or are you hired by groups that already have the structure?
No, so typically, I guess neither one.
Okay.
Initially, I intake groups of not group. I intake individual businesses, and I'll put them in a group uh, for the purposes of what I call implementing the system into their business. And it's usually, we either do a 6 week program or a 12-week program. Um, and then at the end of that, on the other side of that, when it's implemented, then there's an opportunity for more of a mastermind approach. The front end is more of kind of like a training and mentoring and guiding approach to say, hey, let's do this together. I'm kind of like the coach at the gym
Yeah.
that keeps people showing up at 6 a.m. To exercise in the morning. That's kind of the role I play to guide them through. And once the system is implemented into their business, then there's the opportunity on the other side of that to join masterminds on an ongoing basis. Does that make sense, Steve?
Yeah, totally. And if I was a small business owner listening to this program right now, how would I access that opportunity?
Yep. So you can find me at the wholepiesystem.com is the website. And there you can just reach out there. There's lots of resources. There's assessments. There are free tools and resources you can download. And there's a contact form that they'd be able to say, hey, I'd like to learn more about working together. The other place to find me is on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my stuff online is on LinkedIn as opposed to the other platforms.
Okay. Another thing that I thought was really interesting too, we couldn't have a business discussion without talking about AI, right? But you said it interestingly that AI, just think of it as a new team member. I thought that was a good way to put it. So, as opposed to being afraid of it or it's going to take over our world or we're going to lose jobs, if you just look at it as, no, this is just another team member on the team.
Yeah, it's I like what I find with AI, and I'm still navigating the world with AI myself. Certainly no expert in it, but what I tend to see is that some people are kind of afraid of it, don't want to try it, and on the other side, they might be like, well, AI is going to solve all my problems.
Yeah.
And neither is the right approach in my opinion. Like AI used correctly can make you, a better leader, a better business owner, can save you lots of time. Um, but it's certainly, and hey, I may chew on these words as AI further develops, but I don't think AI is gonna replace those those essential things that you as a business owner needs to bring to the table that we've talked about already, that leadership, that relationship building, that holding people accountable, like that still is always going to be there at a human level, in my opinion. And so lean into AI, use it as another team member. It can literally probably save you as a business owner at least one um, salary
Yeah.
if you use it right. Um, but then take that salary and reinvest it somewhere else in your business.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Another thing in the book I thought was interesting was, everyone talks and knows about organizational charts, but you say functional organizational chart. So why put the word function in front of it? Tell us a little bit about your theory behind that.
Well, it's kind of a play on words. There's two reasons why I use that word. I mean, the kind of tongue in cheek one is if you actually do it correctly, then you actually have a functional organization as opposed to a dysfunctional one.
Right, right.
So that's why I like it. But it also comes because every business, small business or big business, you have core functions of the business. So a core function of your business is an essential component of the business that needs to function correctly in order for the business to function correctly. And so at a very minimum, every business will have three core functions. They'll have sales and marketing. So you need to, you know, have something to sell and you need to let people know that you have something to sell. Um, Operations is the second core function. So this is actually making the thing that you sell or providing the service that you sell. Customer service, interacting with customers, that's all kind of operations. And then finance, you have money coming into your business and you have money going out of your business. So every business on the planet has at least these three core functions. And the purpose of an organization chart, in my opinion, is to plot out who is responsible, who is accountable for each of the core functions in your business. And then as the business grows, your core functions might expand a little bit. So sales and marketing might become different standalone core functions. You might have some different core functions under the operations umbrella. You might have, customer service might be separate, or research and development might be separate, or logistics might be separate. And then in terms of finance, sometimes HR gets lumped in finance. So you might take HR, and that's its own core function. And then as the business grows, you'll see this functional organization chart grow as well. And you've got, John is responsible for sales, and you have Mary's responsible for marketing, and you have Bill responsible for operations, and Susie's responsible for finance. And at a glance, you can see not just the people in your organization, but you can see what they're responsible for in the organization. And that helps to make it a functional small business.
And also, we don't want to give the impression that the book is totally about systems and frameworks and all that, because there is a section in there too on developing a winning culture, which yeah, I'm sure we can agree is extremely important in any business. And so let's talk about that a little bit, and some of the things that you think develop that winning culture. And the first one is kind of the big idea wins. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, best idea wins, I think it is.
I'm sorry.
And yeah, yeah, best idea wins. So, especially in a small business, like just because you don't want to have this, loudest voice in the room concept, which I've heard somebody else coin. That's not my phrase, but I really liked it. Like oftentimes the business owner can be the loudest voice in the room. And, you might have a bunch of people around the table that might have their input, but the business owner says, no, we're doing it this way. Well, that's the end of the discussion.
Yeah.
My recommendation for a winning culture in a small business is to have a business owner that knows they're not the smartest person in the room on every subject, that wants people around them that have good ideas and that don't just simply say yes, sir, or yes, ma'am to the business owner. And the business owner says, hey, in this organization, best idea wins. I think we should do it this way, but if you can come up with a better way and you can show me why it's a better way, I'll take that all day long. And I think that in my experience, businesses that are run like that are not only better for the business owner, but it helps to empower, all the other people in the team as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then another point you make too, which, I deal with all the time and really try and push is, clear communication is so important. That everybody, clarity, 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 the more that you can be clear and the more that everyone's on the same page and understands exactly what they need to do and how they need to do it,
Mm,
takes a lot of that spinning wheels trying to figure things out of the equation, and I think you can be
mm.
much more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, like this is a personal bias of mine. I'll just put it right up there. Like, lack of clarity drives me crazy,
Yeah.
and it always has. Um, uh, and so it's just so important in my opinion, and I have seen it in small businesses that there can't be any ambiguity because ambiguity allows people to sort of hide in the business a little bit. Because it goes back to that functional accountability chart where you can see at a glance who's accountable for what. That's really clear. There's no ambiguity there. So Mary knows she's responsible for sales. If there's a sales related issue, then Mary has to answer for that. There's clarity there. Another way that you can instill more clarity into your small business is to go back to purpose, is to be really clear on what is your vision for your business, what is the mission of your business, what are the core values of your business. So so that everybody on that team knows, okay, this is a business that I want. The captain of the ship knows where they're going, and I want to get on the ship. I'm clear about where we're headed, and I'm clear about my role in helping us get there. So that's really important. And then, one more example I'll share is, when you do your quarterly planning every quarter, and in particular your annual planning, um, you want to share that with your whole team. You want to, maybe not every little detail, maybe not, all of your financial statements, but you want to share where you're headed and what is most important this quarter or this year. You want to share that with your team so that everybody is clear. Because when things are not clear, that's when people on your team try to fill those gaps with assumptions or rumors or whatever they see on social, or and that's no good for anybody.
Yeah.
So clarity is so important, and the whole pie system structure really helps up level the level of clarity in a small business.
I'm a real believer in mindsets. And the other thing that I pulled out of that section I think was really good too was like, if you have a mindset of, try and make each other look good. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great concept because, in businesses, people, want the credit and they want to be acknowledged and they want to be the hero and whatever. But if you have a mindset of just trying to make others look good, then the teamwork really comes into it. And we can all agree, I think, that a good team is going to perform better than any one individual.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for pointing that out. That's one of my favorites as well. And that in the book, I talk about how that came from when I was at a management conference years ago, and there was an improv group that was on the stage, and improv, for those that don't know, it's like they're an acting group, but it's all made up on the spot, and there's no script. They just have prompts, and one person feeds off the next, and the takeaway from a management perspective that they wanted us to understand was that in improv, the best players, so to speak, aren't the ones that say the funniest lines and then brings the house down with laughter. The best players are the ones that tee up their teammates to deliver that big punchline. Those are recognized in the improv community as being the best players. And so the concept of make each other look good comes from that, is that if you can get your team to always be thinking, how can I make everyone around me look better? How can I as a team member make my colleague down the hall or across the Zoom screen, how can I make them look better? How can I set them up for success? And if you have everybody in your organization thinking that way, I mean, that's just incredible.
Yeah, I love that example of improv. In our leadership development program and in my company, we actually hired improv company of actors that would come in, like at our annual retreats or some quarterly meetings or whatever, and do their thing, but then also include our people that would go up, and interact with them and whatever. And it's just a really good example, as we all know in improv, it's you never somebody says something and then stops, you never say but, you always
Right.
say and, right?
And
So
yeah,
and then you continue on, and it's such a simple thing, but it was just really impactful, and our people, although petrified of it at first,
yeah,
learned to love it, and I think learned a lot of practical things in the process.
yeah. So being Canadian, big hockey fan. And another way to drive this point home, I suppose, is who's the greatest hockey player of all time? Like I'll ask you, who's the greatest hockey player? Who comes to mind?
Well, you got me. I'm not much. I would just say something. I'm just going to say the only name I can think of is no, I was going to say Gordie Howe, but the other one is Gretzky.
Yeah. So Wayne Gretzky. So Wayne Gretzky is typically what everybody will say there,
Yeah.
and what just happened in the last year was that this guy named Alexander Ovechkin, this Russian guy, actually just broke Wayne Gretzky's goal record. So Alexander Ovechkin now has scored more goals in the NHL than Wayne Gretzky ever did. But will Alexander Ovechkin ever be the answer to the question, greatest player of all time? He'd be the first to tell you no. Why is Wayne Gretzky the greatest player of all time? Because he has more assists than anybody else that's ever played the game has points, meaning that he's the guy that set everybody else up time and time and time and time and time again. He was the greatest passer of the puck. Even though he was a great goal scorer, why he's the greatest player ever is he made everyone around him look better. So another way to think about that concept.
That's a great example. That's perfect. So, Andy, in anticipation of our discussion today, what haven't I asked you or what haven't we talked about that you want to be sure and get in the program?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I just come back to the whole idea of just the massive respect that I have for the small business owner. I mean, I am a small business owner, so this is a little bit self-serving. But the the degree to which they make our communities and the world better, I think is really undervalued, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. Um, that the degree to which I can help a small business owner make a little bit more money, or maybe a lot more money, create a bigger impact in the world, and to enjoy that process again, to rediscover that joy of leading and running their business. Sometimes I say to fall back in love with their business again. Like if I can do that, um, that's a really good day for me, and that's really what drives me. And so I just want to continue to do that and help as many small business owners as I can.
At this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you can leave us with today?
Mm, mm. I'm just sitting with that for a second, Steve,
That's fine.
because
No worries.
I, I, it's a really important question, and I think that I mean, the reason why I'm taking a little bit of time with it is because I think it can get overcomplicated, leadership. But I
Sure.
think just leadership is just showing up. It's being yourself. It's bringing the humility um, to the table and uh, and being the kind of person that people want to work with, that want to follow, uh, and want to help them achieve what it is that they want to achieve.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, Andy, this has been a pleasure. Nice talking to you today. It sounds like you've got a great thing going here, working with small businesses and helping them get through the tough parts of those of that journey, and certainly needed in the world. So I appreciate your time today. Wish you some good success in the book going forward, and great having you on today.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a great discussion.
Okay, good. Well, maybe we'll run into each other down the road one of these days. So take care.
Hope
Have a good
so.
rest of your day.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orange, the word, .coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.